What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. Wanted to drop a couple more nuggets. I'm still in Marrakesh in Morocco, and I had the opportunity to just kind of sit back. I've been working a lot of content. Morocco is a beautiful place, tropical, right on the coast of the Atlantic, northern western Africa. Um, so definitely, if you get a chance to swing through, it's a French Arab vibe, and that's what you'll see a lot of, cuisine-wise, culture-wise. So if you're into the French Arab culture, then this is a great place for you to come, and it's in Africa. So that is also one thing to kind of put in a note. It's right near Algeria and Tunisia and that whole part of the world. I think it was Mauritania, I believe that's. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah. So I got a Zoom I'm getting ready to hop on in a few minutes, but I did want to drop this note out here because I've been hearing like recurring themes over and over, especially when the topic of colonization comes up and all of that. And people don't like that word because I guess that sounds, to some people in Africa, that's like saying racism in America, so it's like it's a trigger word. But anyway, what the whole point of this channel is to do is to inspire and educate through travel and through the truth. One thing that you won't see me do on this channel is cater to or enable dysfunctional mentalities. So I'll just call it how I see it, whether you agree or disagree. Cool, it is what it is. One thing we can't do is force somebody to see things the way we see it. And one thing I've learned in life is that sometimes you see things one way in one moment, and then you get more information, and then your opinion may change. And that's happened to me in life. And so because of that, I do a lot of, I have a lot of my thoughts in pencil because I may get new information that challenges that particular thought, and then it needs to be modified. And that allows you to remain teachable. There's so many people who are not teachable, and they got some information, they run with it, and even after someone comes with information that shows them that perhaps you don't have all of the information, or maybe what you do have is a little bit off, they still want to hold on to the bad information. This thing is kind of jabbing me in the neck. That's why I was like, ugh. So that is, part of it. But anyway, this whole thing, and it's really in coming and traveling around different parts of Africa and seeing so many similarities to America. But if someone's exposure, and let me qualify this because I said on another talk, I talked about how exposure is beneficial, and they took it as though saying that those who have more exposure feel as though they're better than others. And no, that's not not in the context of what I was talking about, not what I meant. I talk about it in the context of being able to process information. So if you're only exposed to, I'll just give an example. I grew up in DC. If all I was exposed to was Southwest DC, and that was my only worldview, and that was the only thing I understood, and I saw the world through Southwest DC lenses, then I would be very limited in my global contextual understanding of things, or contextual global, whichever way. So what I recognize is, by way of all of the different exposures that I'm having, it is broadening my understanding. And that doesn't make me better than anyone else, and it doesn't make another person better than the next person. It just means that you have a different understanding. Maybe you have more information, maybe you don't. But I encourage people to get the exposure so that they can at least determine or decide for themselves. Because a lot of the pushback that I get, especially whether it's in America or Africa, 99% of the time, not 100, but 99% of the time, those who have the strongest pushback have only exposure in their world. So they cannot comprehend what I'm saying because my perspective is broader than that. Not that it's better, it's just that it's, I've seen this or that or whatever, so I'm now explaining it from that perspective. So that's just, one piece of it. There are times where, people who have had exposure as well, and they're able to share from their perspective. But I tell you this much, if you really dive into history in Brazil, history in the Caribbean, history in America, history in Africa, history in India, and other parts of the world that have been affected by other interests, you will see a recurring theme. That's just the bottom line. There's a recurring theme which brings us together and not separates us, because the same systems or the same mindset, maybe applied a little bit differently, but the same mindset is at play. So let's see how much time I got. All right, I got a few minutes. One of the things that I recognize, and I talk a lot about this as far as mentalities are concerned, and especially when it's there's this thing, and I talked about it in the previous talk about how some people in Africa feel as though African Americans in particular, I'm not sure if it's so much with Afro-Caribbeans or Afro-Brazilians, Afro-Colombians or Afro-Mexicans or not, but in particular they kind of like to come after African Americans as being upset, filled with hate towards white people and all of that. And again, I did a full talk on it, to really explain that that's not most. I am one. I grew up in America, and I can tell you that most African Americans do not have hate and bitterness towards white people. The concern I have, though, is when people equate calling out an unfair, unjust system, corrupt system, and putting that as hate and bitterness. That's where my mind is kind of like, no, if something is unjust and unfair, if someone's being stolen from, if someone is being lied to, if someone is having their resources exploited and extracted and not being fairly compensated, I don't know how that equates to hate and bitterness. It just doesn't, as far as from a broad cultural perspective where the majority of a particular ethnic group feels that way. And I tell people all the time, I say African Americans are as diverse as the continent of Africa. So to put everybody together and say everybody thinks a particular way is naive at best and extremely ignorant. Extremely ignorant, because you'll have within African American culture people who will embrace the colonizer or the master. Even to this day, you have people who are still who embrace the mindset of, well, why y'all got to talk about that? Y'all need to leave that alone, because Master gonna do right by us. Y'all see we done made progress, and Master gonna do right. Master gonna give us a good education. Master gonna give us a seat at the table, and Master even gonna give us an Oscar award and a Grammy award, and Master gonna do all these different things for us. And so we just need to hush up now and wait our turn. And when we wait our turn in line, Master gonna do right by us now. Things have changed. Master done went to church. Master done found the Lord, and the Lord gonna move on Master heart, and Master gonna do everything he's supposed to do. And the Master done stole everything, and Master gonna bring it back. As a matter of fact, the scripture done said the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the just. And I know Master don't want the wrath of God to come down on him, and so now he gonna do what he's supposed to do. What happens if Master don't have no fear of God? Now, this is talk, I'm talking about African Americans. So, just like you have those African Americans who stand up and say, nah, bump Master. You can have a segment of the population, Lord, and Donald Trump, he's so terrible, and Donald Trump, Lord have mercy, Donald Trump. But they forget all about Master Biden. They forgot about Master Biden and gave Master Biden a pass. and we got our hopes in Master Biden. And they don't forget all of them, but Master Biden done screwed them every which way but loose. But now somehow they all up Master Biden swinging off him. I mean, you know, I say, oh Lord. And that's what's going on with many African Americans. So you can't hate somebody swinging off the jock, you know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of people doing that, and they swing off the jock of the Democratic Party. Lord, ooh Lord, lifelong, I can't wait. And we the donkey, we can't. Well, you showed off the donkey, but that's a whole nother talk. I believe y'all alone with that today. But I hope what everybody understands, and this is where I became an independent. I just can't. You know, when you see what you see and you live long enough, I just can't sit there and be like, yeah, that's all. Oh Lord, they're gonna do right by us. And we got a black mayor, and now we had a black president, we got a black, but the system remained white. But see, you're filled with bitterness and you're filled with hatred. No, we just call them facts. And so, like I said in one of the other talks, I didn't have ancestors die in Africa and ancestors to die and bleed in America for me to come back and be limp. That's just the bottom line. God gave me a brain to see, to be able to process, and eyes to see and be able to hear. And so that's what you see. So if that equates to hate and bitterness, then that's just what it is. But what I know, a group of people will not be deaf, dumb, and blind to these types of things. When it's very, very plain. And we don't want to see another generation of people sitting around, oh Lord, we're gonna get it by Hakuna Matata. Oh Lord, it's gonna be all right. And one day at a time, sweet Jesus. You know, all of that. People are saying, enough is enough. And you don't see that from other people. You don't see that type of, it's one thing to forget. You don't want to walk around just mad at everything. You don't. But the minute you forget is the minute you lose. I think back to the 60s, even though I wasn't here in the 60s. But I think back to that era and what I've seen in videos and what I've been told by elders who grew up during that time. And one of the things they talk about is that fire and that passion. Many of them were young in their 20s and 30s at that point. After Malcolm, Martin, others around the world, because there were others around the world who were killed, African presidents killed, coups, overthrows, exiles, all kinds of stuff going on. Once the 60s did what it did, notice in America, after King was killed, all his boys were basically paid off and given low positions and stuff. And so I'm gonna parallel this. So all of that group basically became silent. Although they might have been given speeches, when it came to moving the needle economically, that movement that had started in the 60s came to a major halt. We went to schools in the 70s and 80s that largely did not teach us anything as it pertained to economics, financial literacy, and empowerment on that level. But we were told to get good grades in English and trigonometry and everything else, which is fine because you want to be able to communicate. And if you're going into engineering or a field that requires calculus and trigonometry, you want to be able to excel with that. But everyone at the end of the day needs to understand how to manage their resources. And so that was void from our curriculums by and large. And I went to Georgetown Day School, which is supposed to be one of the quote unquote premier schools. That's where all the premier people sent their children. Then I went to South Carolina Public Schools, Dorchester County District 2, and then I went to DC Public Schools in Washington, DC. And so none of those curriculums placed an emphasis on that. So I go back to um, the leaders, and this is where oftentimes, again, in our culture, we're trained to look to our preachers. We're trained to look to our politicians. And so as a child, I was like, well, we run, Jesse, run, Jesse, run. And you had the other ones come along, but nobody had any real power. It was lip service. And this is not to diminish any accomplishments, but when you go back into the 60s and the 50s, you saw where there was movement. You saw people willing to go out and do certain things. That my generation, we now we march and protest. Obviously when you see George Floyd and you see Trayvon, you see those different things happening, and it sparked something. And then I think the insurrection of the Capitol woke up a lot of people too, to say, yo, hold on. And so that's what you're starting to see this next generation, even part of Gen X, wake up to say, wait a minute. But they're recognizing that now it's a different approach. And it's not the approach necessarily from the 50s and the 60s, but it's a 21st century approach, which is going to be a bit more stealth. And it's going to be a bit harder to control simply because of the cyber aspect of it. People can make money electronically. People have become more savvy. There are a lot of people out here who do not have, they're like, listen, they understand it's a resource game, so they're playing to win. So that's where you get a lot of things coming out of Nigeria and other parts of West Africa, because they're playing to win. They're like, this is not fair. It's never been fair. So they're not going to play fair. And that's why people are like, oh, these scams coming out of here. They're surviving. They're doing what they got to do. That's, at first when I used to hear that, I was like, oh man, but then once I understood some of the context to it, I was like, well, their perspective is the thief made up the rules, so they're making up their own. I mean, it's, so it's like you begin to learn and hear different perspectives along the way. Now, obviously, they're playing in the thief system, so if they get caught up in some stuff, they're going to have to deal with the consequences. But for some of those people, that's their protest. That's how they're making it work. That's what they're doing. I don't encourage that, but as you begin to spend more time and learn and be around people, you hear their philosophies and you understand their thought process. But here it is moving forward, because a lot of times people say, well, what's the solution? What's the solution? Well, the first thing, and I said this last time, we got to stop being limp, y'all. We got to stop sitting up here trying to act like something is not the case. Stop gaslighting ourselves. That's what we do. We gaslight ourselves. We look in the mirror and it's like we don't want to see what we see, so we put something else up there to make ourselves feel better, because the brutal truth might be very painful. But healing doesn't come until until you are in a position to be able to exactly figure out the problem and address it. It reminds me of the old song back in the day from Annie Lennox and the Eurythmics. Some of them want to use you. Some of them want to be used by you. Some of them want to abuse you. Some of them want to be abused. Oh, oh, oh. Anyway, so some people really do want to be abused, and some people don't want to be. Some people are fine with things as they are. I'll leave this last thought and I gotta go. When people say that someone is filled with hate or bitterness because they call out injustice, or they call out something, I would then have to wonder about that person when they call out that same stuff. Because I'll just give an example. In Africa, there's a part of Africa, it's not all over, because you got a lot of strong folks on there. I'm telling you, you got some. This is why I love to meet those minds in Africa who see what time it is in Africa, who see what time it is in America too, in Brazil and other parts of the world, and they're rising up. But there's this other little segment of the population of people who are quick to say, filled with bitterness and anger, and I just choose to be kumbaya and all of that. But in the next breath, this is the contradiction. In the next breath, they go in with such hate and bitterness on their own African leaders. They go in on them, our corrupt leaders, they're nothing, and this president was better than that president, and this such and such, and they go in. And I was like, wow, look at all that hate and bitterness. Because it's the same critique that's being levied by many so-called African Americans on the white supremacy systems. But yet, they can't see how they go in on their own. And that's a play to get you to go in on your own harder than you're willing to go in on the real problem. And that's how these wars are funded. That's how they've been able to exploit these ethnic conflicts all over the world. If you begin to understand, people say they want peace, that's an illusion. That is silly, foolish, and naive if you think that this world will ever have peace. That is ignorant. Because the way that this world is founded, there have been wars upon wars upon wars. And for those who are religious, even in your religious books, you see there's wars upon wars upon wars upon wars. In the springtime, when kings go off to war. So when we begin to get off of this fantasy of just peace and understanding that at every turn, where there's an ethnic conflict in a particular part of the world, while they're distracted fighting each other, doing all of that, those interests, whoever they might be, come in, extract resources, build their own infrastructure, give arms to the ones that they want to win. And a lot of times you'll have the superpowers actually fighting each other through micro ethnic conflicts. But again, that's going to be too much for somebody to digest. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear that we just have hope for the future. Yeah, okay. Well, you can have hope for it, all right. But if you're sitting passively on the sidelines waiting for Master to come over there and give you something, and you're going to be sitting there just limp for the next 50 years. And that's what I tell people. I said, for the next generation, you better learn how to be aggressive. You better learn how to be wise. You better learn how to get out here and be strong, position yourself accordingly. When everybody else is sleeping, you might want to wake up a little bit earlier, go to sleep a little bit later, maintain healthy, be healthy and all of that. But please don't get caught up in this illusion of what they're selling, because that is one of the reasons why people are limp. And then it all comes to a head at some point. It eventually comes to a head because they have to come to terms with the reality of it. And so what I'm saying is, for those who want to be a part of the peanut gallery, understand world history, understand if you're curious about African American history and understanding the mindsets of some and why they have a low tolerance towards imperialism and colonization, dive into it a little bit deeper. And it's not just racism. It's not just racism, because you have a group of people in America who are very conscious and very aware of what has been happening. And a group in Africa that's very conscious and very aware. And that's in all of the countries. And so those people are rising up and disseminating information so that people just don't run roughshod over them, just running roughshod, taking their stuff. And people just saying, okay, it's no problem. We'll get over it and keep on moving. It's like, nah, Jack, stop. We need to put a pause on this. We understand we got to play the game. We understand this is your system and this is how things are. But you're not going to run roughshod over us. So anyway, like, subscribe, share. Maximum Impact with Jay Cameron. And make sure that you also travel the world in the 7 seas, because everybody's looking for something. Until next time, take care, be safe.